Hi, this is Joanne from Harvard Business School. You're listening to the Clear Admit podcast.
Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, June 1st, 2026. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. How are things, Alex?
I'm good, thank you, Graham.
I thought we were going to have an episode with like a bunch of bird song and the sort of breeze off the sea and Cornwall, because you had a power outage. You were going to have to record outside, but I guess, alas, everything's back on.
Everything is recorded.
So we've got a ton of stuff this week. We've got an admissions tip that I'll get into on pre-MBA coursework. We're going to look into a special program at NYU Stern, and then we continue with our Real Humans Alumni series, checking in with alums working at PepsiCo, Accenture, and Bain. And obviously, Alex, you picked out some candidates for us to discuss, but is there anything going on the admissions front? I feel like we're still seeing some late round decisions and maybe deferred enrollment stuff happening, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the schools like Tepper, London Business School, Arizona Carey, Georgia Terry, Georgia Tech, Scheller, amongst the schools that are releasing decisions, scheduled to release decisions this upcoming week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there is still some activity. There will be for the next couple of weeks too, I would imagine.
Okay. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that stuff. I guess everyone listening is probably happy to hear that I don't have any big events to plug. We just had a whole, series of events across May, and our next official Clear Admit events will not be until July. That's our famous essay workshop series, which is always fun, and we'll have 20 plus schools joining us for that. I'll get you the details of that, probably in a couple of weeks. We haven't yet posted that stuff to the site. But actually, it's funny, Alex, I'm going to be moderating a panel tomorrow night, June 2nd, here in Paris with admissions directors from a group of leading U.S. business schools who are going to be in town. And so those schools are Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, MIT, Chicago, Kellogg, Columbia, Tuck, and UCLA. So I'm going to sit down with them. I'll be moderating a couple of panels that we're running, and then there'll be kind of a networking fair. So anyone in the Paris area, come out for that. And then next Monday, June 8th, I'm going to do the exact same thing in Philadelphia with the same batch of schools, but also an additional school, UVA Darden, is going to join as well. And again, that's a prospective student event. And I'm kind of excited about that one, Alex, because it's taking place on the 8th floor of Huntsman Hall at Wharton.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is that giant space they have at the very top of that sort of dome in the building, which I've never been up there actually. So I cannot, so that'll be fun. Yeah. So you can actually sign up for these events at bit.ly/topmba26. So topmba26, bit.ly. So yeah, that I'm looking forward to that. I've done this. This is the second year in a row that I'm helping these top schools out with some moderating, and it's a pleasure to do it.
Yeah. No, they sound like great events. And returning to Huntsman Hall, I presume you were at Huntsman Hall a couple of weekends ago too, right?
Yeah. So I'm back and forth across the Atlantic these days. It's been a little tiring, but it'll be fun. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that we did another piece about careers. Elliot on our team continues to kind of comb through trends in kind of career placement. And the piece that he ran is just a piece that we called Why an MBA Remains One of the Best Pathways into Management Consulting Careers. And, you can dig into the article, but there's a ton of data on percentage of, graduating class that is going into consulting. And, there's still several schools with a really big chunk of their class that gets placed into consulting. At Tuck, that number is like 41%. Same thing at Emory, Goizueta. McCombs, also 40%. Darden, 39%. So those are some of the schools that really top the list when it comes to the percentage of people getting jobs in consulting. And I just thought it was interesting. There was this little tidbit in the article about how MBA consultants at McKinsey, for example, can expect a base salary of about $192,000 plus signing bonuses of $30,000 and then performance bonuses that can reach $40,000 in that first year. So you could end up earning $267,000 in your first year working for a place like McKinsey. So pretty crazy stuff. And I know we've been hearing a lot, Alex, about how, gee, job market's a little tight. AI is eating away at things. But some of these top firms are continuing to hire MBAs, and obviously going to a top school increases your odds of landing one of those jobs. But I just can't believe that compensation. It's kind of ridiculous.
No, it's really incredible. But I'm going to put in a bit of a counterpoint to this.
Yeah.
And I think the consulting landscape is going to change, or
Yes.
is changing. And instead of it just being MBB or bust, or looking at the MBB, the Big Four, and whatever the next tier is called, we're going to start seeing FDE type roles, right? Forward deployment engineers, which aren't necessarily just engineers. They're effectively consulting assignments from the top AI firms, and they're being deployed into their client, corporates, to try to deploy these AI technologies more effectively. So
Right.
they go to these companies, they learn the workflows, how the companies work and operate, and then help design workflows with AI. And I think that is going to be a big, important trend. And I imagine we'll see that seeping into MBA recruiting. I think we'll see some of these firms going directly to top tier MBA programs to seek some of these types of employees.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think what'll happen is, let's say a Google or an OpenAI will grab someone senior from McKinsey, bring them in, and help, kind of build out this kind of a practice of like going right into companies, rolling out their tools, and they'll probably argue, "Hey, we built these tools, we know how to use them best." Whereas I think the McKinsey of the world or the Bains of the world would argue, "Yeah, you may know the technology, but we understand how these businesses operate from decades of experience." So it'll be kind of interesting to see how this all plays out. But I do agree, yeah, there could be roles for MBAs for sure.
Yeah, and that's absolutely. So
Yeah.
exciting times.
We could do a whole podcast on that. Let's
Yeah.
move on, though. We've got an admissions tip that we ran this past week about pre-MBA courses. And I wanted to just ask you, kind of put you on the spot a little bit, Alex, but I just wanted to ask you, what are a couple reasons that someone might need to do what we call pre-MBA coursework before they even apply or attend business school?
Yeah, I mean, if you're coming from the liberal arts background, perhaps it makes sense to take some basic accounting or economics work before you begin the MBA, sort of help you sort of get up to speed in terms of the preparation for the intense first quarter or whatever it might be. But it also might be because, maybe your transcript isn't ideal and there's a few blips along the way, and you want to mitigate that with an additional bit of coursework and so forth. So I would put those two as the main buckets of reasons why folks might want to do this.
Yeah, and what I love about these pre-MBA courses is that not only, as you say, do they help you get ready for business school so that you can actually hit the ground running and not struggle in the first year, but they also enhance your application, right? So if you're trying to address a lower GPA from university, or if you're just from a liberal arts background, like you said, I think it can really be helpful. It's a great signal to the admissions team. So something to keep in mind. And the article gets into what are some of the courses out there that people typically take, because there are some that are tailor-made for this. So you can read the article to learn more. We also on the website did a piece about a student who's at NYU Stern. And basically, we get an inside look in this article into like a program that's called Endless Frontier Labs. And this is basically, Stern runs this mentorship program for early stage science and tech startups. And so the student, whose name is Santiago, he's going to graduate. Actually, I guess he maybe just graduated, right? So he's talks us through the entire couple of years at Stern, and he ended up via this program getting paired with a digital tech startup called Alpha Correo. And what's so amazing about this is, you think you're going to read an article about someone who has this sort of hands-on experience, as kind of an intern in a company. But here's what happened. during his MBA, he's working at this company as part of this Endless Frontier Labs program, right? And he gets put into a provisional CEO role of this company. And he's actually now working there in that capacity after graduation, too. So he says, there's a great quote from him. He says, "I came to Stern hoping to move closer to entrepreneurship, but I found more than exposure to startups. I found a pathway to help build one. My MBA did not simply help me change functions, it changed the role I believe I could play in shaping the ways companies use frontier technologies." So he's now the CEO of this company. It's just kind of a crazy story. I know it's a really good read, and if you're interested in, obviously early stage science and tech companies, it's a great read.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Yeah.
So the other thing we did is we continue to catch up with alums from top schools. Again, the idea being, I always think it's useful for prospective MBA candidates to, hear from people who are several years out of business school in many cases. So we'll start with a woman named Farnosh, and she is from Texas. Originally Austin. She's 32. She went to McCombs where she got her MBA, and she's now an associate finance manager at PepsiCo. She had also gone to UT Austin for undergrad, where she studied biology. And here's what's kind of interesting. Before business school, you'll never guess what her job was. She was a dentist. Okay. So she was working as a dentist, and now she's associate finance manager at PepsiCo. So we asked her, why did you choose to attend business school? And she says, "I absolutely loved being a dentist and always will stay one on the inside, but the career was beginning to take a toll on me physically. I knew I could not practice full-time forever. I needed to find something else that I enjoyed professionally. And while I knew I was sharp and had transferable skills, I needed to go to business school to demonstrate that to an employer and make my career change possible." So that she said that about the kind of change. And then we said, like, why did you choose PepsiCo? And she said, "I wanted to join a company where I could grow long term and that cared about its employees. I was also impressed by the number of PepsiCo finance alumni who are now CFOs at other major companies." And then the last thing we asked her is just what would be something you might do differently as part of a job search. And she said, "I would have done more career and industry exploration prior to the MBA. I didn't even consider CPG initially because I knew nothing about it." So anyway, it's such an interesting story from dentist to PepsiCo. I mean, it's kind of a crazy run, right?
That's a huge shift, no doubt. And what is the value of the MBA is to allow folks to make those types of transitions, right?
Yeah.
So this is a really good example of that.
Now, I would say, now she's in the finance side, but I would say if she's helping more people to drink Pepsi, I'm sure a lot of her dentist friends are happy about that too.
I was going to say there might be a little bit of a tension there.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, she's in finance, and it sounds like she's hoping to, stay in that path. But in any event, really interesting story. I encourage people to read that. We also caught up with Alexandria, who is from IESE, graduated recently from IESE in 25, and is a senior strategy consultant at Accenture. She's 28 and hails from Manila in the Philippines. She went to undergrad in Manila, studied management. And she had worked at Procter and Gamble for 4 years before going off to business school. And now, as I said, is at Accenture. And we asked her, why did she go to IESE? And she said, "First, I wanted to be in Europe, and IESE quickly stood out. And the fact that it was in Spain definitely helped. Second, as early as pre-MBA, I saw the breadth of the IESE network and felt the strong sense of IESE community around the world. Third, I prefer practical learning. In my classroom alone, we had over 30 nationalities across different industries debating approaches to business decisions daily due to the case method that they use there, plus courses like the executive simulation and venture capital investment competition, where you present to current board members and fund partners." So that's why she went to IESE. We also just asked her, what's one thing you do again as part of your job search? And she said, "Stay true to myself and my values. It can be easy to be influenced by trends or others when you aren't, but that doesn't help," right? So she's just talking about, I think we've talked about this a lot, but getting swept up in the kind of everyone, wants to do certain types of jobs or whatever. So pretty interesting stuff. And it sounds like she's, had a really good experience at IESE.
Yeah, and Spain's not such a bad place to get an MBA, I reckon, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, really, really good. And yeah, stay focused. Don't worry about following the crowd, etc. So yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And then finally, the last Real Human alumni that we're going to catch up with from this series is Amelia. And she went to Vanderbilt, graduated back in 23. So she's several years into her post-MBA career. She's now at Bain and Company working as a consultant. She's 33. She's originally from Tennessee. And she went to Washington and Lee as an undergrad, majored in physics, engineering, and accounting. So it was a double major. She also, as I said, went to Owen, where she studied strategy, operations, and marketing. And, again, she had worked prior to business school. She'd worked at Ernst & Young. She'd done a lot of kind of tax related stuff. And she went to business school and now is doing strategy consulting at Bain. She's been there for a couple years. And this is a great description. We asked her, why did she want to go to business school? And I thought she did such a great job of articulating this. She said, as I moved up in tax and began engaging more in client management, I realized the most interesting problems taking up our clients' time and energy weren't the ones I was working on. After moving into industry and seeing our company through a large acquisition, I learned that I wanted to be part of the broader strategic conversation. Why did we make this acquisition? Why now? Simply recording the tax impact wasn't cutting it anymore. Business school felt like the right next step to pivot into strategic finance, which is what I expected to pursue when I began my MBA. So kind of interesting, articulation of like she felt like she was kind of on the sidelines or really in the kind of weeds with the tax related stuff, and now is looking at more strategic decision making.
Yeah, tax, what are you doing? You're sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's of what's happened.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than the view going forward and being strategic. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. And again, quite a common rationale for wanting to pursue a top MBA.
Yeah.
And so forth. And yeah, and she's obviously super smart too. I think you said she has a physics undergrad degree, right?
Yeah. Physics engineering and accounting. I mean, yeah. So
yeah, wow.
And what's funny is she said she wanted to pivot into strategic finance when she started her MBA, but she ended up at Bain. And she explains a little bit as to how that happened as she, followed that journey through recruiting. But then we also asked her if there's any advice that, she wished she'd been given. And she says, I think this is great. She says, relax. You are way too stressed for something that will surely work out in the end. Sleep more. Exercise more. This is the best time to make your health the priority and build great routines before you're in a very demanding job once again. So I thought that was a nice way to think of it. I mean, I think sometimes people do get really bogged down in like, am I going to get that job that I dreamed of when I came into business school? And am I getting the right grades or, all these things. But the reality is that people tend to land on their feet out of these programs, and that it's probably worth, taking the time when you're not working full time to really, just tend to yourself.
And how's your running going, Graham, with this hotter weather we're experiencing?
I'm not happy about the heat wave we have right now. I hate running when it's, if it's above 25 Celsius, I'm not really happy to be running. So, and it's been like 33 here in Paris the last couple of days. So yeah, not good.
Nice.
But some people love it. Yeah, that's not my cup of tea. In any event, I wanted to mention that obviously people can write to us as always by writing to info@clearadmit.com. Just use the subject line wiretaps. Alex, it's funny. I've been in a couple of meetings recently. I meant to tell you this where, been visiting with schools and other people in our industry, and people listen to this show. Like someone in a meeting I was at a few days ago was like, oh yeah, I listened to the episode a couple of weeks ago and you guys were talking about this. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, people tune in on the, admissions side of things. So it's kind of funny. Just to kind of connect and hear that people are tuning in. So guess we got to keep the show going. Do you have anything else though before we get into this week's candidates?
No, let's kick on.
All right. So this is Wiretaps candidate number 1. So our first candidate this week comes from an ApplyWire entry. So this person is a prospect. They're thinking about business school. They have 11 programs on their target list, and those programs include Carnegie Mellon, Chicago, Columbia, Cornell, Harvard, MIT, Kellogg, Wharton, Stanford, UVA, Darden, and Yale. They've been working at Bain and Company in India, And they're thinking maybe finance or private equity after business school. They also have a family business that ultimately they want to help return to, and get involved with. Their GRE score was a whopping 337. They had a GPA of 8.7 out of undergrad. That's on a scale of 10, and that's very good for an Indian undergraduate degree. They've got 3 years of experience to date, and they mentioned that they grew up inside this pharmaceutical manufacturing business that their family runs. Obviously, they're currently with Bain, but one of the big things they're thinking about is like, oh, how can I go back after business school and potentially transform my family's company into a vertically integrated green pharmaceutical platform to sort of prove that this is possible at an industrial scale in India. You asked them some questions about what else they do, because they did a very good job of articulating their kind of career and career goals. But you asked them, do they do anything outside of work? And they then left a really long comment with like a laundry list of all the things they do. They're involved with a lot of mentorship and some interesting initiatives even within Bain about a kind of disability inclusion group that they created or helped to kind of lead and get going. So lots there. I'm kind of curious what you think of this candidate because, the numbers are certainly there and they are working at a place like Bain and they have a seems like clear set of career plans. But what do you make of this candidate?
Yeah, I really like this candidate, honestly, Graham. I think obviously the numbers are right there, 337, 8.7 GPA. I like the thoughtfulness of their approach to their long-term goals and their potential impact. They've obviously thought long and hard about this. They have the platform in order to execute on this with their family business. And so forth. I just think there really is a lot to like, as you pointed out at the end. Some of the extracurricular work that they do, etc., also impressive. So to me, they've just got to get all their ducks in a row and apply in the first round to the extent that they can, right? So if they are considered overrepresented in the pool, by getting into the first round, they'll be able to hopefully stand out because of their numbers, their impact, their focus, their energy. Quite frankly, Graham, I think this is a very strong candidate out of India. I'm not sure what API innovation refers to in their description. So they just might want to be a little bit careful in terms of use of jargon, because I'm thinking application programming interface.
No,
but that didn't seem to fit the context.
In this context, it's active pharmaceutical ingredients. So I guess there are all these chemical compounds that are produced, and it seems like India has been a big provider of some of these. Like they make some of the compounds, and then they get shipped off to be made into drugs or whatever. I don't know, but. Yeah, so but you're right. That is one thing that I was a little concerned about is, they need to be, figure out how to describe all this stuff in a way that anyone could understand.
Yeah, and mostly they did that well. It was just that one phrase that sort of tripped me up a little bit.
Well, especially because people think of it as, what is it, application protocol interface or whatever.
Application program interface. It's basically how everything's connected online.
Yeah, and so that's the most common use of that acronym. So in any event, I think they're, like you say, the main concern is that they are Indian. We don't know if they're male or female, but either way, they're probably a little overrepresented, and so applying in that first round is really what it's going to come down to. But they have a good list of schools. I don't think they should apply to 11 schools. They should probably narrow that list a bit. But what I like about the list is that it's a mix of it sort of spans the top 16 or 18 schools, right? So they have a range. It's not just all M7. So I think that's smart.
Yeah, but when you combine their numbers, the fact they're at Bain, and their vision and goals and impact, I think this is a top candidate.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, they will probably get into an M7 program, and So anyway, I want to thank them for sharing their story. It's a really interesting story, and they have a very kind of admirable kind of career goal. So best of luck to them as they get their applications together for round 1. Don't wait on any schools for round 2. But let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So So our second candidate this week, Alex, is also from an ApplyWire entry, and this person is looking at Chicago Booth, Harvard, Kellogg, Wharton, and UVA Darden. They want to start school in the fall of 27, just like our past candidate. And this person, their pre-MBA career has been in naval aviation. So this is a military candidate. They're looking to pivot into consulting. They're particularly interested also in the kind of aerospace and defense sector as well. They have a 715 on the GMAT, a 3.76 undergraduate GPA, 7 years of work experience. And as they point out, they're a veteran, Ivy League undergrad, and they want to go either into consulting or potentially like a leadership development program. And just in case you're, like me, still confused about the GMAT, that 715 is basically like a 750 or a 760 on the old scale that they used to use. So very, very impressive numbers. But yeah, what do you think this person's chances are? Because they have a pretty, top-heavy list of schools here, right? I mean, it's all kind of M7 plus Darden.
Yeah, but that's where they should be targeting for sure.
Yes.
I mean, I assume as a naval pilot, I think that's what they said that they were. That's a good naval aviation. So presumably that's a good role, and they can show, through their essays and so forth, their impact and their military career should play out really well. And you combine that with a ridiculously high GMAT score, a strong GPA from an Ivy League institution. We probably need to just know a little bit more about what makes them tick and stuff outside of work and that, but everything sort of on the surface looks really super strong for a candidate like this, Graham.
Yeah, I agree. And they, just the test score, like, you don't see that many 715s, right? I mean, that's a good test score. And yeah, as you said, I mean, they went to an Ivy League undergrad. Like, everything seems to line up here. We don't have a ton of information about outside activities, but they've been in the military, so sometimes those are a bit curtailed anyway, and that's understandable. Obviously, they should connect with the military clubs at all the schools they're considering, make all those connections, and get down to business. I would apply in the first round. They don't have to, but I would always, prefer that there's probably more likelihood of, scholarship dollars, or, maybe they'll get some, I don't know if they're eligible for like GI Bill stuff too, but in any event, very, very strong candidacy, right?
And kind of unlike our first candidate, the urgency for round one isn't as present. And the point I'm trying to make there is for this candidate, just focus on the very top programs in round one.
Right.
Because they can just as easily come back in round two, and assuming they're US veteran, which I presume that is,
yeah.
They can easily come back in round two if they need to. I don't think they will need to, but they can. Whereas our first candidate, if they're potentially overrepresented, they've got to go all in on round one, and that includes a spread of target programs. And so forth. So that's the difference between these two candidates. One's potentially slightly overrepresented, and the other is not by far.
Right.
And that changes their strategy a little bit.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah. So I want to thank that person for sharing their profile, thank them for their service as well, but they should be in very good shape. And I agree with you. Go after the very best in that first round and see where the chips fall. Can always come back in round two. In any event, thanks to them for sharing. Let's move on and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. So our final candidate this week comes from a DecisionWire post, and this person is, as usual, undecided, right? So they applied to Georgetown McDonough, they applied to Boston Questrom, and UCLA Anderson. They got into all three, and they got into a couple of them with some serious dollars, right? So they got into Georgetown. They have a full ride there. It's a GI Bill plus scholarship plus yellow ribbon. UCLA Anderson, they also got into, and again, with a full ride. So they've, again, GI Bill plus scholarship. So this is a veteran, like our last candidate we talked about. So this is a military vet. They had 5 years in maritime autonomous systems testing. That's what they had done in the military. They had a 635 on the GMAT exam and a 3.4 GPA, in case you're curious. And, just to give people the scaling on that, a 635 is like a 680, 690 on the old test. So those were their numbers. They mentioned that their long-term goal is to place into defense tech procurement. And they said that they worked directly with private sector firms when they were testing systems. So I guess in their past career in the military. And they also say that they want to be in the Northeast in the long term. So yeah, that's kind of the background there. There was something else that I wanted to. Oh, so you had a little bit of back and forth, or I guess Elliot had some back and forth with this person. But in any event, what do you make of this? Because they're kind of on the fence about, do they go to Georgetown with a full ride or UCLA? And keep in mind, they want to be in the Northeast. And I think that's maybe one of the factors. But yeah, what do you make of this?
Yeah, if they wanted to be in California, this would be quite an easy decision, right? Anderson is in the slightly higher tier than Georgetown, McDonough, and yeah, that would make sense. But their inclination for wanting to be in the Northeast long term, so I'm not talking about the actual MBA experience, but in the long term, would for me make someone really scrutinize McDonough to see if or how realistic McDonough is to allow them to pursue their career goals, so that they can land in the Northeast and so forth. There will also be a much stronger alumni network in the Northeast from McDonough than there would be from Anderson, because Anderson's, alums would be more centered on the West Coast, etc. So in the longer run, that might play out well for McDonough. So, and you would think there's some defense tech infrastructure in the sort of the Washington, D.C. area and so on and so forth, right? So obviously the government, etc. So I would really look to see if McDonough can provide them the opportunities they're seeking from a professional standpoint, because clearly I think from a personal standpoint, McDonough wins.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because what I don't know enough about, and what I recommend that they probably have more knowledge of this than I do, but if they want to be in defense tech procurement, I'd have to think that there's some stuff, there's got to be something happening in the DC area in relation to this. It could be that many of the companies are, out on the West Coast or in other parts of the US, but but there's probably a lot happening in DC too, because that's where the clients are, right? So who are buying the stuff. So it's a little complicated, but I do think, by the way, I didn't mention this, but they had, their undergraduate experience was at a NESCAC school, which is kind of the best new kind of liberal arts. It's an alliance of liberal arts colleges in New England, includes, I think, Middlebury, Connecticut College, a lot of the good schools up in that area of the US. And so I'm just thinking the 1-2 punch of having a great liberal arts college plus a sort of Georgetown University could be compelling for someone looking to build a career in the Northeast, right? I mean, those are two, they'll have a couple of brand names on the resume. But I do recognize UCLA Anderson is a more highly ranked school, often top 16 in the US. And Georgetown kind of fluctuates from 20 to, maybe 25 or so. It depends on the ranking. And so that's, something to consider. Obviously, what's interesting is that they've got, so much money from both schools, so they don't really have to worry. There's no finance impact here. And they didn't mention Boston, presumably because it's maybe a bit lower ranked, but maybe they didn't get as much money either. But in any event, yeah, it's tricky. I hear you though. I tend to think, boy, Georgetown's pretty compelling if you want to be in the Northeast. But they need to do their due diligence when it comes to the jobs, because they did mention that some of these firms that they're interested in, they know hire out of UCLA. So, yeah, I would. Yeah,
and I don't think you can underestimate the relationships that you build in top MBA programs with other, admitted students, obviously other students in the programs and so forth. And you really, as you'll attest, those relationships will last for the long run. And if you're all in the same region, i.e. in the Northeast and that, it's just better, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you right now, even a school like Wharton, which has a powerful global network, that network is very heavily concentrated around, I would argue, probably New York is kind of the epicenter. And obviously there's some people in Philly because that's where the school is, but there's a big pull. And then there's a whole batch of people on the West Coast, but that's Wharton, right? And so, what I would do actually, if I was this candidate, I would check in with the alumni club for Anderson in New York City and Boston, and just see like how, is that active? How many folks are in the club? What's going on there? Because that could be a nice way to sort of, because otherwise I can understand what they're saying. They're like, oh, I could go and spend a couple years in LA. It sounds like that they're open to that. Like, it's not like they want to be in the Northeast for their degree. It's after, right? So they're open to like having a great couple of years in LA, but then I would just want them to verify that they can find their way back. So they need to do their homework there.
Well, there's two things: verify that they can find their way back, but then also the value of the alumni network in the long run. Is there any real traction in the Northeast, or is it effectively on the West Coast? So I think that's important. That's what you're buying into for these top tier MBAs, right? Is the longer run impact of connections and networks and functions and whatever, right? Which could be really beneficial from a practical standpoint in terms of getting new jobs or whatever, but also more importantly, I think, from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'll add to this, and then we should probably just wrap up, but the other thing I'll add is just that, Georgetown as a university has a lot of people who go there for the School of Foreign Service, for the law school, and I would have to think that some of these individuals are in the, kind of working in government and defense, and there's probably a broader network than just what McDonough can provide. So I would encourage them to consider that as well. In any event, great dilemma to have: free rides at two really fantastic MBA programs. So I hope that person lands on their feet. They won't go wrong. It's just they need to do their homework and figure out where they're going to be best suited. But yeah, Alex, thanks so much for picking these out as always. And we'll do it all again next week.
Very good. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.